And we have as we were talking about, the live transcript is enabled. So you should be able to turn on the closed captioning in Zoom. It's the robo captioning, so it may not get everything right, but if you have any questions or for clarifications, just let us know and we can double back on something. And yeah, so thanks everyone for being here. And we are, as we said, in Portland. Thanks to folks who are both from and not from Portland for being here. And we typically do meetups about every other month, and with a gap in the middle of the year for summer. And we tend to we typically have events where we try and touch on different aspects of accessibility. So it's not always, we've had some that are a little more focused on education, a little bit more on the legal side. So we try and kind of dabble into different areas of it. So if there's something you'd like us to focus on that we haven't, let us know. And we have a few tentative dates on the calendar right now. They're on our meetup page. Our rest of the events for the rest of this year are TBD, but we'll post those on Meetup whenever we get info on those and have something to announce. We have we're part of an umbrella group of meetups in Portland, PDX HCD, which is the Portland Human-Centered Discipline Collective. And it's a bunch of different groups that focus on things like design thinking and research and accessibility and so forth. So we have a little collective of groups where we kind of support each other and don't schedule over each other. And a lot of crossover between the different groups. And sometimes we do collaborative events together. Their calendar has also been a little quiet this year, as some other have, but you can find their calendar at pdxhcd.org. And one of our sister groups in that umbrella is a group called CAIFU, which is the Computer Human Interaction Forum of Oregon. And they're our fiscal sponsor, which is great. So we're able to take donations to handle accommodations when needed. And so they act as our nonprofit fiscal sponsor for that. And once upon a time, we had groups, kind of donate space and for these physical meeting rooms. We're not doing that now, but my employer, AudioEye, is currently, we're using their Zoom tonight. But it's BYO snacks for everyone, unfortunately. So, and yeah, I think that's all I've got for sort of housekeeping. If folks want to keep yourself muted when you're not asking a question or something, but if you have a question, if you can use the Zoom hand raise function, that's great, or put something in the chat. And I will be keeping an eye on the chat while Janna's presenting. And do you want to do kind of questions as they come up, or questions at the end, or a little of both?
Yeah, probably a little both. If there's something urgent or something clarification, I'm happy to kind of make it a conversation, and then certainly have plenty of time at the end to talk.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I know it's the one thing that Zoom hasn't apparently figured out in the last 18 months is how to make the chat easy to see while you're presenting. So I'll keep an eye on it while you're talking. Yeah, and with that, I'll hand over to Janna, who is going to be presenting, who is also one of our co-organizers of the meetup, who volunteered to present this month. And we'll let you take it away.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Yeah, just to reiterate, if there are questions during, feel free to raise your hand, throw it in the chat. And if there are, and we'll definitely have time afterwards to have a conversation. Oh yeah, that totally disappears. That's so bizarre. It's gone. Okay. So yes, so I do co-chair this with Josh. Josh has been running it for a couple of years now, and I kind of joined more recently. And in the next half hour or so, you will learn a little bit more about why I've joined and why this is so important to me. So I will jump into that. Again, my name is Janna Kimmel. I don't know that I've met all of you. In fact, I don't think I've met many of you. So thank you for attending tonight on what is a rainy night in Portland. My day job is I'm a UX research manager at Hinge Health in where our headquarters is in San Francisco, but I work out of well, currently my home office in Portland, Oregon, and hopefully one day soon in a nearby, an office near you. I'm really passionate about accessibility, like I said, which is why I'm here tonight, why I co-chair this group. And hopefully in the next half hour or so, you'll all understand how to grow or start a program in your own organization. In the last few companies I've been in, I've actually started accessibility ERGs, or what in some companies we call these employee resource groups, as part of my last two roles. It's not anything you're hired to do. It's sort of one of those things you take on and say, oh, sure, I'll take on more work. But it's incredibly rewarding, actually, and I really enjoy doing it. So I have continued to do that. And in each of these two roles or organizations, the focus has been really different. So as I go through these slides, you'll kind of hear both sides of the coin of how it might work with one focus versus another focus. I'm curious from those of you who are here tonight, how maybe you can, I think there's a hand raise thing. How many of you already have some type of either accessibility program or accessibility focus in your current organization? I see 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So maybe like 25% of you all, from what I can see right now anyway. So we have work to do, right? And that's, I love the conversation that led into this meetup, because we're already talking about how do we get our hooks in, right? How do we really make change in places large or small, honestly, where it's hard to make change. My last organization was about 4,000 people. My current organization has grown in the last year to 750. So, and there are, sometimes the larger organizations are more beholden, but it doesn't matter. Everybody should be, I heard the term today, don't should people, or don't should on people, which I thought was a great term, but people should be doing this. It's the one place where you can should. Okay, so today I'm going to talk a little bit about why I care about inclusive design, why inclusive design matters, what it is, and then the bulk of the conversation today will be the 10 steps to starting a culture of inclusive design. And that this is all going to be presented in the lens of growing a garden. It's much more fun to talk about growing a garden, and I think it's a wonderful metaphor for how we can grow accessibility. So quick little bit about me and just why I even care. What am I doing here? I grew up in a household where I actually really early learned that not everyone has access to the world in the same way. So my mom was hearing, but she was a teacher of the deaf. And because of her experience, I learned that each individual navigates the world in a different way. I was part of a deaf theater troupe as a kid. I went to a summer camp with kids in wheelchairs and kids with different abilities. And that just kind of became very quickly part of my world. Personally, I also spent my teens on and off crutches. I had chronic unexplained ankle pain for years. And so I know the feeling of trying to walk down the hall at school with your backpack on because you can't actually carry anything and your arms hurt from using the crutches. Managing fibromyalgia pain. I'm actually having a really bad day today and my pain has flared up for no reason I can explain. And I've been spending a lot of time with my current organization trying to find a good speech to text tool. Would have been nice if they had something already set up, but they didn't. And so all these things are little and big things we can do in these organizations that we are a part of, or that we just interact with on the sideway. I know, Wink, you were talking about that Blackboard, and maybe that's not our organization, but we can also teach others how to make this better. A little bit more. So in the 90s, I worked in theater and in costume design, which was my first career. And I only bring that up because it led me to understand that there's multiple ways of getting in and out of clothing for quick changes. So if you go to the theater and you see somebody in a costume and less than a minute later, they're wearing a completely different costume. That was the work I was doing for a while. And took that work to the community of people with special needs. So if you can open up the side leg of a pair of pants so somebody can get into it, if you can replace the buttons with, instead of doing finicky buttons with Velcro, all of that were helpful to people who just couldn't do those things. The young man in the red cape is wearing a cape that I had designed for him because, again, putting clothing on when you're sitting in a wheelchair, especially something like a coat, super difficult. That was in Chicago. You need a coat in the winter. And then from there, I moved on to do my thesis work on, that's the bottom left there, on a device for people who do physical therapy at home. And what was super exciting about that is that I am now working in a company that provides online physical therapy for people with acute or chronic pain. And it's very similar to my thesis work. And I just feel like I made this amazing circle over the last 15 or 20 years and kind of came back to my personal origin, but I have been working in health for that amount of time as well. So that's a little bit about me and what brought me here. And I do want to mention that I know I'm preaching to the choir. I know a lot of you are very aware that this matters and why it matters. What I found in talking with organizations is it really helps to have some kind of backup, some kind of information you can take to your organization and say, this isn't just me. There's a whole wider conversation that needs to be had. And of course, if there's a financial conversation, that's helpful too. If they're missing out on customers, people listen to that. Before we talk about doing it, I just want the how, I want to tell you a little bit more about the why, and hopefully this might help some of you who are still trying to bring this back to your organizations. So if you haven't seen it, Microsoft has a great inclusive design toolkit. They talk about situational disabilities, which can be something like being in a loud bar. Talk about temporary disabilities, which is when you break your arm, your leg, or your fibromyalgia flares up and you don't want to move your arm. And permanent disabilities like living with permanent hearing loss or blindness. And then examples of inclusive design, I'm sure all of you know about things like curb cuts, and obviously we're using these wonderful captions on videos. Even something like Alexa can make life easier for a person with a disability. But the thing that we always have to go back to is these designs benefit everyone. The curb cuts become suddenly important for if you're rolling a suitcase down the street or if you're pushing a stroller. The captions are suddenly important if you're sitting in a loud bar and you're trying to watch your favorite sports game on TV. Sports game, you can tell I'm a big sports person. Or if you have your hands dirty from cooking, ask Alexa to read the recipe or answer the phone. All of those things were designed for one use, but they really benefit everyone. And that, I personally have found that conversation to be quite powerful in some of these organizations. So if you're thinking or starting to grow a program around inclusivity, you do know how important it is for people to understand those numbers. I am always a proponent. I am a huge bleeding heart. I believe in doing the right thing, but sometimes to do the right thing, you really need the numbers behind it. So this is a graph that I have here on the right, well, right in front of you on my right, from the US Census, and you can see that 22%, more than 1 in 5 people in the United States has some kind of disability. Half of those people are over 65. So if you have a product that's used more by an older population, obviously that's going to go up. A disability can be an ambulatory, independent living, cognitive. We talked earlier about hearing, and then things like self-care, dressing, bathing, or even just difficulty seeing without glasses. I know this may be a little bit of a small graph to look at. I've got all the references on a page in the back, and I'm happy to send this out. So you'll be able to take a closer look at these if needed. And then a myth that I love to bust is the myth about finance. Disability doesn't equate helpless, doesn't equate moneyless or unemployed. And I love this graph because you can see that the two most prevalent disabilities are ambulatory and difficulties with it's IADL, the activities of daily living. And it correlates to the two groups with the most money to spend. And my guess, although I don't know this for a fact, is that those numbers are also people that are older in age, right? So they've gathered more income and they have more money to spend. This graph is from a great presentation that was done by DQ, which is another really good organization to partner with. But they can and they should be spending money on your product or your service. So how do you get those dollars in-house? You make some adaptations. And I know we had Lainey talk earlier this year, but I want to go back to the lawsuit issue too. There are so many, as you can see, this huge increase in lawsuits over the last few years. One of the things I learned about, I think in one of the webinars I've attended, is that there are a few legal counsels that spend time just like sending out crawlers, and they're actually just trying to find websites that are not accessible. So some of these may just be, threats and things like that, but some are very real. I've got links to the three favorites I have. That Burger King one, a woman was trying to order and there was something metal, like some kind of lane guides or something like that. She couldn't get her wheelchair through it. And so she sued because she wanted her Whopper. A woman, I believe, was trying to order a hoodie on Beyonce's website. And again, couldn't get to the product she wanted to order and she sued. And the one that everybody knows in accessibility is the Domino's lawsuit, where again, a gentleman who was blind, I believe, you tried to use his screen reader and couldn't on the Domino's site, and no reason he shouldn't be able to order a pizza any more than anybody else, and sued as well. And these go from, the Burger King one is 1994 and the last two I think were 2019. So this continues to happen. This isn't old news by any means. It just gets bigger and bigger. So again, if you want to go back to your organization and say, hey, you want to avoid a lawsuit altogether, here's a great thing you can do. Let's make sure that our digital assets are accessible and our physical assets, as in the Burger King example. So now we're going to jump into 10 steps to inclusive design and how inclusive design is like starting a garden. So the first thing we need to do is decide what it is you want to grow. This is out for those of you not from the Oregon area. We have a beautiful tulip farm out in Woodburn, and these folks, they have one job, right? Their one job is to grow these amazing and beautiful tulips. So you as an individual or as an organization first need to decide your focus. You might want to focus on the employee experience. Or do your employees have speech to text? Do they have access to the desks that they need? Do they have an interpreter if they need one? Or the product. Maybe you want to focus on making sure everything can be read by a screen reader, or that it has the grip strength that you need if you're 65 and you have arthritis. Think about where the organization's biggest gap is. Is one of those things really making it difficult for your organization to succeed? And of course, the last thing would be, where are you likely to have the most impact? One of those things might be more impactful than the other. At my current organization, we actually, like I mentioned, we focus on chronic pain. And for many people, that's considered in the realm of disability. And so, we've been talking about what can we do to keep our employees pain-free and able to do their jobs. In my last organization, we had a pretty inclusive hiring process, but the product itself wasn't as inclusive as it needed to be. It was a product for people with diabetes. And as you may know, people with diabetes have a much higher incidence both of hearing loss and vision loss. So that product really had the onus on it to be accessible as well. So if you're doing an employee focus, obviously one of the things that you can do is build empathy. So building empathy might mean, currently we're talking about maybe having folks watch the movie Crip Camp and then come together and talk about it. We're working with the HR team. One of the people in HR actually has added a tagline to his emails that says, you know, do you need support for your interview? Let me know. And he said, I don't know how to go about this and how to get other people to do it. I don't know where to start. And I said, just talk to your boss. Ask her if everybody can do it. I mean, it's sometimes we get stuck by thinking that there's some great big process when really we can literally like ask the person next to us or the person we see twice a week and just make change. So don't be a little and big change can be really impactful. And then increasing access to meeting rooms, to webinars and physical space. And I put this image up in particular because I think it's interesting to not, even if you don't have a blind employee at the moment, or even if your blind employee doesn't read Braille, which is a real possibility, you're signaling, right? You're signaling inclusivity. If you have a handicap stall in the bathroom, you're signaling that we're accommodating or we are making sure that everybody is equal and you belong here as much as everyone else does. And so I think these types of things are incredibly important to create a level playing field for all employees. And for those of you who are in a place perhaps where you might want to focus more on product, you might think about if there's a customer type that's more likely to have a disability. Maybe some of your customers have diabetes and some have lung cancer. Well, your diabetes folks might have more vision and hearing problems. Lung cancer may have more neuropathy. So you might just think about who needs what and where do you want to focus there. This is a quick primer. Again, I know most of you on this call probably are very well versed in all of the different laws. ADA is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination of people with disabilities, physical and digital. Section 508 is a federal law that requires federal agencies to maintain and use the technology that can be used by people with disabilities. And WCAG, or what's often called WCAG, is an international set of guidelines for creating accessible websites. And to the right is a very, very short snapshot of the many, many rules that make up WCAG. So you can dive into that at your leisure. And again, there's a link in the back if you have not seen these before and you'd like to dive into them. The second thing we do with a garden is choose a location. So in the garden, how are you going to pick your plants? How are you going to water and care for them? And just like that, we need to choose a location in our organization. And we need to think about how are we going to access the right resources? Who can I partner with? Where can I have an actual impact, but not be seen as getting in the way, because that can be a problem. Finding my advocates is a really big one. And then is there an executive or a senior person who can sponsor you? Most likely your first location or your first choice of location is where you sit, because just by attending tonight, you've shown that you're passionate about this. So take it on as you, or take it on as your department. And in my last organization, it was myself and another designer, and we just decided to take it on, and it slowly grew and kind of got legs. But the real goal is that cross-functional relationship and to kind of build the process into your DNA as a company. And then we're going to plant our garden. And in order to plant, we need to start small, right? You can't just put in a huge tree. You need to put in a little tree or a little plant, and you need to give it lots of room to grow. And so I also think that you need, with this type of work, you do need to start small and give it room to grow. I read a story about a person at Vimeo, and there was a technical support manager and a developer, and they reached out to Nobility, if you folks are familiar with that organization, And they worked on making their video player more accessible. And now it's WCAG and AA conformant. And they knew some basics, the folks at Vimeo did, but they didn't know about things like the fact that links that open in new windows without warning. And they didn't know about some of the other ways that this technology works. So by partnering with that outside expert, they were able to highlight those issues and provide the organization with fixes. And the tech support manager just said, you know, you are the resource, you really just have to get started. And that is the same for you, all of you. One of the things we're doing at my current organization is bringing in speakers from around the organization, just trying to uncover folks who have the lived experience of living with some type of disability and putting together a panel and having folks talk from their lives so that people can say, hey, I have a coworker who has a different life experience than I do. I want to reach out and learn from them. And that maybe if I have another friend, I can know that that friend who's deaf might be better accommodated at this organization than I thought. And so it just kind of starts that ball rolling and puts the energy around it. And then we invest in basic tools. And when we're gardening, we buy really nice tools. You make working in your garden a pleasure instead of a chore. One quick note on gardening, I learned about this awesome tool that has like a sawtooth on it for pulling up weeds. I have never had a better time pulling up weeds and since I got that tool. And, you know, any of you who do art or paint, you know what difference even just like a good paintbrush makes. So invest in those tools. Some tools are free. Sorry, it is just pouring out here. Some tools are free. And so you can download some of the test tools. Also think about people as tools. You can reach out to Knowbility or Level Access or DQ. I think there's also a company called Fable and lots of different places that will support you in this effort. You don't have to go through it alone. Sketch, my understanding is, has some basic plugins. WebAIM has some basic contrast checkers. I think you can even Google like free accessibility tools and all sorts of interesting things come up. And on the right is what you get if you start checking your site for errors. So you want to make sure that your site doesn't look like that. The next thing in gardening you want to do is test your soil. Is it acidic, alkaline, or neutral? And in the same way, I encourage you to kind of dive deep into your organization and test the culture, figure out what it would make to make change. And then figuring out how your products fare in the hands of a person with a disability. You can reach out to the Lighthouse for the Blind locally. You can put out a call for support. You can work with Knowbility and Fable to bring in people with a disability. What you see on the right, on the left here is a kiosk that Alaska Airlines designed. And anybody who has a vision impairment and has tried to use a touchscreen, clearly not a whole lot of ability there because you can't tell what you're tapping. So they actually added a physical touchscreen to the side. So now you can feel the buttons, feel the different shapes. And there's even a place at the very bottom where you can plug in a headphone if you know enough to even look for a headphone jack. So a really amazing way to add accessibility to a process that most of us find quick and easy, but for a portion of the population is probably a disaster. And then we enrich our soil. So we want to add some fertilizer and nourish the fruits, the vegetables, the plants. And we want to fertilize our organization. So as you complete those 1 or 2 or 5 smaller projects, it's time to kind of fall out into those larger projects. Can you train your customer service organization to know how to better answer the phone for people with different disabilities? Does your QA team know how to test? Does your sales team know how to speak to that? Maybe there's an organization that has a lot of Medicare patients. You know, how do we sell to them? Does your marketing team know? Does your design team? And again, pulling people in with that lived experience can't be underrated. There's amazing statistics on how much higher the job retention rate is if you hire a person with a disability. There are fewer work-related accidents. Of course, you're increasing diversity and you're just bringing that experience in. So maybe I don't even have to go out and find a blind person to test with. Maybe that person's in my organization and I can say, hey, take a look at this. What, take a try, and can you do what needs to be done given the changes that the team is making? Number 7 is to plant with care, and kind of equating that with showing you care. And you can do that by doing surveys with your customers. At my last organization, we sent out a huge survey and got amazing data back on the portion of our population that was living with different disabilities, what their household makeup was, what their income was, just all sorts of really interesting information to try and triangulate what devices they were using and really understand where we could have an impact. You might want to create a panel so you have ongoing information. Another quick anecdote, there's a group in West Virginia called the West Virginia Division of Culture and History, and they created an advisory panel for their arts center. And their charter actually outlines the composition of a committee to include a person in a wheelchair, a person who's deaf, a person who's blind, someone with a learning disability, speech or motor disability. And in addition to including people of color and older adults, all of those people are included. So imagine if you're creating an art exhibit and you have to make sure that all of those people can access it. What an amazing exhibit that probably is if it's done well. Yeah, and so all these points of view are taken into account when spaces are being created to go and experience the arts. And then you want to nurture your garden. And by nurturing, oops, I have a little typo there, sorry. You want to be sure that people can apply what they learned in those trainings, right? So it's one thing to sit in a training, but if the organization isn't going to give people the time to go back and change the code, or they're not going to give the designers the time to get up to speed on what a contrast checker is, it's not going to be successful. This is one just sort of recommended way of perhaps setting things up, is having an executive sponsor, maybe a task force, maybe some ambassadors. So people who go out into different parts of the organization and then come back together and say, hey, this is what's working or not working here. This is what's working or not working over here. An anecdote about a woman named Laura Palmero Allen, who worked at Google, and she had limited vision, and she took on what many of you have heard, like the Google's 20% project, kind of your passion project. And she did that for about 3 years around visual disability. And 3 years in, they realized they really did need to do more. And they created a centralized accessibility team to oversee those products. And she went from 20% of her time on that project to full-time on that project. And the other thing I really like about that is that it gives those of us who are making these really incremental changes a little bit, you can give yourself a little bit of breathing room and say, it took someone 3 years at Google and they're fairly forward thinking. So you might need to give yourself a little runway and give yourself a little time and take those baby steps and know that they will eventually build on each other. Oh, and then, yeah, your ambassadors, sorry, it could be HR, R&D, customer service, all sorts of different areas around the org. And then we're going to pull the weeds. We're going to get rid of the things that get in the way of our garden blooming. Sometimes that's just education. You may want to train and educate for those with less experience in this work internally. You might want to partner with an organization. The screen you see here is from a company called Be My Eyes, and they have a tool that allows people who are blind or with low vision to reach out to them, and they have dedicated customer service folks who know how to support people with low or no vision. And so, I've heard stories where people call in And then customer service says, you know, to no fault of their own, they weren't trained, but they may say, well, what do you see on your screen? And a blind person would say, well, close your eyes. That's what I see. So the folks at Be My Eyes have been through that already, and they understand what a person can see. So you can call and get help for any product or anything. And they have also started a program where if you're somebody like Procter and Gamble and you have a lot of products out there, they have a dedicated customer service group, and those folks are specifically trained, and they go through a special queue at Procter and Gamble to be helped by folks who need that very specific training, or who've had that training and who need that type of support. So, you know, think about how to remove these barriers from your audiences without making things harder than they have to be. And then we get to enjoy our harvest. Absolutely celebrate your successes. I think no matter what you're doing on your team, my current company is amazing at celebrating success. They're big on wins, but can you quantify it? You know, has your customer base grown, and has it grown in a way that you can tell that you've taken in a different type of customer? Have calls to customer service reduced, or are they just, is the time going down because the customer service agent knows how to service a particular population? And maybe your brand image is improved. And again, there are ways to survey around that. And hopefully through some qualitative research, you can find out if you really have a better user experience for everyone, right? Again, we talked about from curb cuts to Alexa, this helps such a wide range of people. So key takeaways, I will stop talking and start listening in momentarily. Starting small is great. It's really just about starting. Inclusive design absolutely needs a champion, but it's never an individual effort. There's always plenty of work to go around. And making sure the organization or whoever you're working with has people with the lived experience. We don't want to make change necessarily for it's. There's a great saying is nothing about me without me in the disability community. And I think that's really important as we all have very good intentions. It's important to make sure a person with that lived experience has a voice in the room as well. So that is the end here. This is a great exhibit. I went to a museum exhibit up in Victoria, BC, and all of their exhibits had Braille on them. And they also had, this is actually a replica. So there was a statue to the left and it gave you a replica. So if you were vision impaired, obviously they would appreciate if you didn't touch this, what was it, an ocarina that was probably thousands of years old, but you could, a person with a vision impairment could actually touch this. And it's fun for kids and it's fun for adults. I'm not gonna lie. It's great to have multiple sources of input. So all of these things, again, support others and support folks who really don't have another option. I think that is the end of my slides, and I'm happy to have a conversation or questions. Thank you for your attention so far. Josh, have any questions come in?
No open questions at the moment, but yeah, this is a good time to open the floor. And for anyone who has thoughts, questions, etc.
Sounds good. Oh, and somebody, thank you, Josh, for putting the Make It Fable on there. Yes.
Yeah, I was trying to keep up when I recognize names, but I'm sure you said the deck has the links in it, so folks will be able to catch anything I didn't get. So.
Yes, I will quickly share that. I have a list of guidelines, tools, service providers, and then story references here if you want to be able to take these stories back, and definitely want to share this all so that you all can take it back to your organizations. It's a lot of work to get that all together, and you shouldn't have to do it twice. Has anybody tried to do something in their organization, and have you succeeded or partially succeeded, or do you feel like you fell on your face and you want to start again?
been pushing for years. After about 8, and it's starting to go a little bit more, but I think it's due to the fact being a contractor and the now have somebody in the government side in the upper levels that's helping along on that end. So it's been nice to see things move along. So don't feel bad if it takes a while.
What have you pushed for?
Just general knowledge and keeping things done, you know. It's like seeing the same problems over and over and over again, you know, either due to the fact that they get new employees that do this, or they don't understand how to do documents or websites or whatever. And now the manager of that group is now, you know, they're spending more time doing trainings and creating how-to documents and stuff like that than just doing the remediation for everybody to make sure that it's accessible. So, you know, I've been helping. My boss wanted me to create some stuff for accessibility testing of like websites. And I checked with people in the other group and they're like, yeah, we're thinking of doing one of those. I said, okay, I'm a little slow right now. So I've been wading through, you know, DHS's, the Department of Homeland Security's trusted tester process for web and mobile. You know, both documents are like 100 pages. Here's the synopsis and here's some links and pages to go look for details to make a much shorter version of this, you know. So I've been doing a bunch of that as of late, which hasn't been too bad.
Oh, that's good.
Thanks.
I have a question and a comment. How many of all of us that are here have worked in disability resource offices? Some. And the typical behavior in a university setting is to silo the disability resources office and make them like, I don't know, the third ugly stepchild in the family. And it would be the last resort of calling anybody with any kind of expertise. We would not be the first ones on the list that would get the call. I was a geek before I became a disability services manager. And I asked permission to sit in on, as a representative on the website accessibility task force. And believe it or not, anybody who knows me knows that this was a painful year. I did not speak. I sat for a year on that committee and I did not say one single word. All I did was listen to see what they were doing. And when they asked me questions, I would answer them. And they began to realize that I actually did know what I was talking about. And two things happened at the end of that year. One, IT gave me administrative privileges on our computers because they realized that I knew more about the software that we used than they did. And they also knew that they could trust me not to screw it up, right? I would like write the path of this is what I did so we could unwrite the path to make sure it didn't get goofed up somewhere along the line. But the consequence long range was that this task force turned into a presidential advisory council. And when we got the president of the college involved in creating an accessible website, he was the one that had the final word when he said, all of the websites associated with this college will be accessible for screen reader usage or any other kind of technology usage. And deliberately, he had the authority to say, we have to do this. And it took, I'm guessing from beginning of my involvement to the time it actually launched was probably 3 years. So perseverance and hard work behind the scenes, and dang it all if it didn't pay off.
I'm so glad to hear that. I love that it paid off, and it absolutely, thank you for sharing that perseverance, I think, is one of the big words that we all kind of have to take with us and just keep plugging. I know there are so many days that you think to yourself, is this really worth the energy? And it so is, because those little big breakthroughs make a big difference. Adam, did you have, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say that some years later, somebody from one of the 11 colleges in this college district ran into me at a conference when I was no longer working at the college. He ran into me at a conference in Denver and he said, you're Wayne Carner. Thank you. He was in IT and he was one of the recipients of this rollout of the accessible website for the college district. And he wanted to make sure that I heard that it worked and that the people, from the students who used it to the staff who implemented it, they were grateful for what we did.
That's amazing. That's awesome that you actually got a thank you. That doesn't always
know.
happen. So good for you.
That happened very often.
It looks like Adam has a question.
Yeah. So I'll share a bit of my story and then end with maybe a plea for some advice and additional information. So I've been very lucky in the last 8 or 9 months. I was hired, I was brought on to the Oregon Health Authority, what became the COVID response and recovery unit, to work on the Get Vaccinated Oregon website, which when I joined the team as an accessibility and UX consultant, the tool was not accessible at all. So that was kind of my first job working on that site. And I was brought on in a very broad contract, so that eventually that work became looking at data visualizations for accessibility, looking at PDFs released by OHA for accessibility, looking at other websites. It's expanded out greatly from that initial starting point. And we've been talking, there are other people within the organization working on this, but it's never been sort of consolidated, pulled together into one team. So that's been something that's been talked about. Word came down today that they are very interested in forming that team. And so I'll be part of, it sounds like, putting that team together and giving it a foundation, which feels like a big, a big thing to be a part of. So I think I would love to have a recording of this. I know it's being recorded, to share it with some of my coworkers at OHA. And if there are other resources like this, I think for taking on a big, very large statewide organization that is now very determined and committed to doing accessibility work and doing it right, but is still sort of trying to find its way and put the pieces together. I would love to have some of those resources, have access to them, so that we could start that conversation, all kind of understanding where we're going together.
Yeah, I'll share both out with Josh and we can get them out to the org. What do you think, Adam, I'm curious, like what flipped the switch for the organization that they decided to do that? And I'm also curious, what do you feel like your biggest, maybe I'm turning into a researcher right now, but what do you think the biggest barriers are to having that succeed?
Yeah, what flipped the switch? I mean, I think the combination of, Black Lives Matter summer, I guess we could call it for want of a better term, and then the COVID crisis have, I think, really changed the conversation in state government and at OHA. So their key word is equity. And now everything is equity focused, but I think they realized pretty quickly they were getting community feedback, for example, that the tools that they were putting out, their websites were not accessible, screen reader users couldn't access them, assistive tech users couldn't access them. I think they then, made the decision to start making more hires and start trying to figure out what they were not doing right. And so that's all to say that it was just, that's nothing that I did. That's nothing that any of us in the organization necessarily did. That's just sort of the moment that we're in, but it's good that at least that lesson was learned by the organization in a way that seems sincere and meaningful. In terms of barriers, yeah, there's so many. It's one, I think, would be that it is an enormous organization. It has a deeply ingrained bureaucracy with a lot of siloing. There are people working on this in various capacities in various ways, but they've never worked together. People will have a list to make their documents 508 compliant, but then then the documents are not coming out the other end compliant. And so there's a question of, well, okay, are you applying the list? What's your process? Anyway, I probably shouldn't get too deep into that, but but
Now,
I know we're all sharing our travails together today, but
now, are you looking for general answers, or are you looking for like web related to documents to videos? Because I know I put a note in chat about the BBC has accessibility stuff. They have some really good stuff on mobile. They have some really good stuff on their design, which gives examples and code examples that might be a little out of date, but at least gives you a good idea and process.
No, I think it's more, I feel secure, in my, as secure as anybody can be, and I know it's a constant learning process, but in my skills and knowledge as an accessibility professional, I think the thing about this that is going to be a huge challenge is how we do this big organizational shift that's going to require a lot of big lifts that there will be a team working on, I think, inevitably, but I think that's more the question in my mind.
I'll ask some of my friends, because I do for the last, 6+ months on like one Saturday a month, 1:00 Eastern time, I do a Zoom call, and so I can get my friends from Europe to attend, along with the East Coast and the West Coast. And, some days we talk accessibility, some days we meet each other and people make new friends, so I get a bunch of different things, so I'll try to see if I can come up with anything and put back stuff.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear a little more from Brittany. Was it Brittany? Yeah. You were talking about lacking, is Brittany still? Oh yeah. Yeah. Lacking SMEs and
Yeah.
yeah. You want to talk about your experience a little bit?
Sure. So I work for a research consultancy where we provide research services to big tech clients. And so as researchers specifically, we've been trying to figure out how we can support our clients when we notice accessibility issues, because we have, like many people, gotten an influx of work with integrity, ethical, and also therefore accessibility issues recently. And I think what we have been struggling with is just because there's so many of us and we have so many different types of projects and clients and different product teams that we work with, like a standard baseline across the company for researchers as far as like what are our best practices in conducting research and different types of methods. What do we feel comfortable providing? Like a baseline accessibility heuristic evaluation from DQ type of principles, which is like stuff that we've done before where it's like, you can't even log in, so we can't test this with anyone. And that's like just first step. But what we're missing there, and when we're working with participants of varied levels of ability, whether or not that focus of the study is for accessibility specifically or not, just like what we as researchers should be looking out for and consistently checking for. So like having a checklist internally might be a good idea, for example. But I think that's just where we are. And those are our own struggles. So not somewhat similar, I guess, to internal struggles, but advising is also another level of trickiness.
It is, and it's it is sort of coming up with your own baseline for your own org. Like in my last org, the baseline was, could we get one, maybe two people in each set of 10 to 12 people, at least have one person with a disability, right? Is that enough? Probably not. Is it something? Yeah, it is. And even sometimes just putting that question into a research screener. Do you use a hearing aid? Do you, like, we don't always think to do those things. And even that starts, and a couple of years ago, this woman, Heather, did a great talk about how those types of questions, and again, kind of putting my researcher hat on, but when we ask them, putting disclaimers around them so that we explain that this is so that we make sure we're inclusive, not because we want to exclude you. Because sometimes people say, oh, if I'm tell you I'm blind, you're not going to bring me into your study, when actually, like, we're going to jump up and down and go, yay, we can talk to somebody who's, you know, maybe not like all of us. And so we'd love to get that person in, or, you know, a different income, a different ethnicity, a different gender, any of those things that allow us to see beyond kind of the end of our nose. But again, it's that start small thing. I would say work with Nobility. They do a great job of helping to recruit people with disabilities. And I think Fable does too, right, Josh? They're up in Canada,
I believe
though,
so.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I know they do. I think they kind of help place people, but also do some of their own like testing as well. I don't know the full, but I know they do quite a few things. Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon's good people at Nobility. Sharon Rush. They even do they do XSU mid-May down in Austin. So it's like 2 days of conference, or at least they used to be 2 days of conference. You know, the talks are an hour and a half long, so you're not in just for a little bit. So you get a little more detail, and then they do a workshop. But the last 2 years they've done remote and broke it up across, you know, like 4 days, you know, so it was like 4 or 5 hour days or something, just so it was easier for people to attend and still maybe do some work.
Nice.
Toronto Accessibility Group is doing their conference in the 20th, 21st, 22nd of October, which I think is like $200 remote. But they also do an accessibility camp in the spring each year. So it's a nice way to spend usually a Saturday learning some accessibility stuff. And there's a whole bunch of other organizations doing the similar around the country. I know Austin has one, Seattle has one, San Francisco, LA, they've done them all. And Australia had one year, or they've had it online, which is nice because, my day at 5:30 in the afternoon in the East Coast is when they're waking up and having the conference in the morning, so you could attend a free bunch of talks on accessibility afterwards.
Nice. And that webpage you put in also has some good links on the bottom too. It's got Fable, it's got the A11Y Collective.
Oh, the Boy One Project, yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at it in a while, but I knew everybody seems to like it.
Know
That's
that
great.
Nobility makes a presentation at the Accessing Higher Ground Technology Conference, and I know that they're going to be there this year in Denver. And I also think that at least one of their presentations is going to be virtual. So if you can't get to Denver and have the big bucks for the Sheraton, you could sign up for a virtual conference. This is Accessing Higher Ground. It's sponsored by Access Technology and Higher Education Network. We're an affiliate of AHEAD.
Also, the CSUN, which is California State University at Northridge, has a conference. I'm not sure if they're doing it in person or away. It's a lot of research related stuff too. But also DQ is putting on AxeCon again this year,
Right, they
my
are.
understanding, for free, right at the same like week or something. So it's like mid-March for like 2 or 3 days. And that was free last year and going to be free again this year. I think they said they had 15,000 people sign up for that because it was online and people could come from watch it from around the globe.
It just ID 24 just happened, which is great. I checked out one of them while they were happening, but all the videos are available online to catch it after the fact. But it's 24 straight hours, and it starts at, I think, midnight UTC. So you just sort of tune in some point during that day, whenever is convenient in your time zone, or after the fact on YouTube. And it has some really great sessions, kind of arranging really across the board on different accessibility topics.
And they have back like to 2014, I think, talks that far back they started it. Because I think they said this was their 8th year doing it. And it's all over the board, from cognitive to vision to gaming to all kinds of things.
Yeah, I sat in a really good session about SVGs and some of the different complicating factors and different things you can do to label them in different ways to get them to work reliably and because this person had done a very big matrix of different possibilities, different browsers, different whatever, and sort of had some recommendations for the most battle hardened options.
I caught 10 minutes of the last talk. That's how busy my day was. And I caught the closing remarks from all the people in charge. It was like, oh, everybody listed off their couple of favorite talks. I'm like, okay, they don't narrow down the 24 hours of stuff. I think Adam has his hand up, sorry.
That's okay. Keep talking if you want. I just wanted to.
I'm good for now.
Wanted to jump in when the time was right. I just wanted to maybe focus my earlier question a little bit more. I think maybe what would help is if anyone has any experience doing an organization-wide accessibility review. So not just a website, not just a document or a set of documents, but really the whole organization in terms of digital accessibility, and then making recommendations, personnel recommendations, hiring recommendations, resource recommendations based on that review. Is that something somebody in this group has experience doing, and I'm happy to connect offline about that? Or do you recommend going through organizations like DQ or Nobility? Is that better done in that way? What are the pluses and minuses? Now I'm asking 8 questions again, but
Are you looking for
Expense.
Are you looking for testers or programmers?
I think he sounds like he's looking more for a general holistic
Leadership.
look at their issues.
You want a wizard?
I think he wants more than just one, but
Yeah.
anyway, no, a lot of people are looking for that. It's not picking on you, Adam.
No, and I didn't mean to make fun at all. My question was, are you looking for someone who is going to do website development or looking for someone who can do website testing?
well,
Or
I don't think we
documents or videos.
I don't think we know yet. I do know one recommendation I'm going to make is that they hire an IAAP certified document specialist or Adobe certified. Because I think I have the skills to tell if a PDF is not accessible, and I can remediate it to some extent, but it is quite the dark art, and I think we don't have that, and I think we need it. So if anybody knows a person,
Yeah,
I
would
think
say
you
level
need more
access.
than person. I think you need persons if you're
Yeah.
Right.
right?
Level
organization.
access can give you that holistic, because that was what we struggled with. We didn't get anywhere because we were trying to get everywhere.
Mhm.
And that's why I always go back to bite off a little bit. But-
level access, DQ.
Yeah.
In terms of leading the review, the agency review
TPG.
process.
Yeah.
And they can make recommendations for what you need and who needs to be doing it.
Okay.
Like what kind of person, what kind of skill they need, what kind of certification they might need.
Yeah.
Who's running the Paciello group now?
don't know exactly who's really, I haven't paid attention who's in charge since Mike
Well,
left. and
Mike's
so
kid was in charge of it, and I can't remember what, they don't call it the Paciello group anymore. It's called something else.
TPGI for
Oh, okay,
So
the
it's
Paciello group. So they just turned
interactive
it to
or
an
something.
acronym. They are also a very good group that can do this kind of digging through the website and making recommendations on what needs to be done and who needs to be doing it. My recommendation would be, if you're going to write a request for proposal, be very specific about what you're asking for.
And it sounds like that's kind of what he's trying to figure out right
Right.
now before he goes further,
Right.
at least to me.
Because what happens is be the same kind of thing that happened with Janna when they were doing it, is you ask for too many general questions, you don't get specific answers. And what you want are specific answers.
And that's
Right.
where those professionals come in and they can
Right.
just kind of holistically, they've done this so many times
Right.
before. They can, start here, do this one thing, because you
Right.
can't boil the ocean. You just can't.
Right.
But you need the people in place to start and
Mm.
they'll help. This is a very personal recommendation. This is not a corporate recommendation, but Connor has been very helpful in just answering tons of questions and kind of helping you know how to talk to your organization. There are many, many other resources out there, but I thought I'd share the link to him directly because he was super helpful for us.
And he's what
He
organization?
works at
is it?
level, he works at,
Level
happens to work
Access.
at Level Access. Yeah,
Got it.
but I know, DQ, Nobility also do really great work.
Got it.
TPG, right? Those are usually the four big ones and a little bit of
What was the other one? PPG?
TPG for
TPG
the
TPG.
Paciello group.
group, right?
I've not heard
Oh,
of them.
oh,
And there's also WebAIM does some stuff more web-based. So does Tenon with Carl Groves.
Oh, that's a good one. I forgot Carl. Right.
You forgot about Carl?
I
Come
know. Don't
on.
tell him because he'll kill me now.
No one forgets Carl. Oh, sorry. Anyways. And most all those people live over near me. Being in
And
DC.
what difference does distance make at this point?
Yeah, I understand, but it's just, DQ, Level Access, all have offices, or their headquarters are here in DC. Carl's at least in Baltimore
Right.
but
Can somebody put the TPG link in? Because I'm not finding it quickly
let me Google over here.
using the Goog.
Oh, I didn't want careers. I said accessibility.
I know, I'm having. And just writing out, Adam, just kind of going back in the year or two we spent planning, just taking some of those numbers out helps too. Just, this, obviously, it sounds like your organization is already ready to jump in, but putting even a straw man together of what you think should happen so people could poke holes in it gives people something to react to. So, okay, we need this group of documents to be reviewed. We need this website to be reviewed. We need somebody to own this and something for this. Maybe you don't know how to make all those things happen, but it sounds like you're the smartest one in the room who can just make a list of what needs to happen, or you and, any colleagues. And so just having that down and bringing that to management and saying, this is everything. Where do you want to start? Right? Because you're not going to do it all. John, thanks for putting that link in.
No problem. And you also, especially if you're getting into like document review, you want some train the trainer people, someone that's going to train either trainers within the college or everybody.
Yeah.
So everybody's responsible for their own document with maybe somebody doing some overview at the end, because that's what we're getting towards. Instead of, I do a lot of document audits and reviews, too many for my liking, but I don't fix them. Like, here you go. Here's what I found. It probably takes me 5 times as long to take screenshots and write it all up. And then I point to all the resources that we have. Here's the 4 how-to for Word, PowerPoint, PDF, and Excel. Read whatever one applies and go to this trainings that they have or open office hours And that might be something too, is some of the train the trainer type people that are Adobe certified or Word certified or whatever can have some open office hours once or twice a week for an hour, let people come in with questions and we'll help them walk them through so they can learn how to do it themselves. And also have stuff available in documents for people to read and maybe some videos, because I know like DHS and the Section 508 website have resources that are, how-to guides, checklists to go with them to make sure you check the document afterwards. But they also have videos showing you how to do it, depending on how all you learn.
Well, this is how we started. This was a huge community college. And with our website accessibility task force, it started by telling all the faculty that all of their own personal web pages linked to their classes and to their department were going to be purged. And we found 157,000 non-compliant web pages attached to our college website.
Only 157,000?
That's all. And we had, that took the first year. We gave all the faculty an opportunity to unload whatever information it was that they thought they could not live without, or the universe was going to dissolve without their knowledge and skill in badly copied, hazy PDF files.
Yeah.
The other part of it that John talked about that's critical is making sure that you actually set up some kind of a training available and give someone the power to do the checklist and remove the things that don't work.
My checklist was more for make sure everybody's doing the same type of review.
Well, exactly. And you get to that point of launching a new website or launching a new form or launching a new link, it has to pass through somebody who's going to check it.
Right.
And once everybody gets accustomed to the fact that it's going to go through that evaluation process, then people are going to start doing it right. How many
Or
of
it
you
doesn't
know,
get published.
or it doesn't get published? How many of you remember Greg Krause from University of North Carolina? Been a while. He set up a contest on campus with all the professors about if you can click off 10 things from your website and make it more accessible, you will win XYZ at the end of the week. And so all the professors got into this big, I can do it faster than you can contest. And pretty soon everybody was like, I can make my website accessible.
Yeah, I know. I think they
it
did
was
a similar
funny.
thing at the University of Texas when Glenda Sims was there, I think.
Oh, yes.
They had contests of, they were running enterprise scanners or something, and who came up with the least amount of errors or got theirs. But even though with those type of enterprise scanning softwares, they can only really check 25 to 35% of what's on a page. A lot of it has to be done manually. I mean, it can't check that the alt text makes sense. There's a picture of me and it says, a plate of spaghetti. Your alt text, you do have it, so it passes, but it isn't right. Doesn't check tabbing order. Can I do stuff with the keyboard? All kinds of things. Sorry.
It's
I
not
think
going to be an
Josh has his
overnight
hand up for
process,
the-
Adam.
I think Josh has had his hand up for
Let's
15
let
minutes now.
Josh jump with sounds like he has an anecdote to share.
Yeah, I just someone said something about office hours, and that was I did that at a previous company, trying to partly to make myself available because I had established an expertise, and there weren't a lot of people on the team that had. And I don't know how successful it was in terms of like the stated purpose, in terms of like people coming to me with those questions. It was so much more than like I posted up somewhere conspicuous in the common area to do this, and it sort of was just like, I had probably more people just drop by and be like, so what are you doing? Like, than I actually had someone like bring a problem to me or whatever. Because the thing is, like, I would answer those questions pretty much all day long. If anybody came to me, that like I'd drop whatever I was doing and answer the accessibility question because I was excited someone was bringing it to me. So I didn't really need to carve out the time to do it. But it did function as sort of an advertisement for it, and especially if I like showed up with a pile of, we were at a mobile company, so I had this pile of different test devices, and I'm on there my headphones and I'm doing different stuff, and it garnered some interest in it, and it was useful for that, if nothing else. And also, when nobody came by with questions, I had 2 hours of dedicated accessibility time that I was able to like get stuff done.
Right, the boss wasn't bothering you because you were over at the desk doing stuff with people.
Mm-hmm. And it did translate occasionally into, hey, it was, if someone said, if I said, hey, yeah, like come to me sometime, we'll set up a meeting to talk about this. They're like, yeah, okay, yeah, maybe not. But it's like, no, why don't you find me next Monday? Every time I do this every Monday, and they kind of knew where to find me. So it did make it a little easier. But I definitely found the challenge was getting past once there was a little bit of momentum, getting from people agreeing it was the thing they wanted to do. I've really never met anyone who was like, this is bad, I don't like this. Like, who cares? Like, I'm sure those sociopaths are there. I just haven't had the pleasure of working with any of them. But the thing I had trouble with was it was a good idea until it really actually competed with something else. Until you say, okay, this story is going to take 5 more points. It's going to be, we're going to do 1 fewer story the sprint. Like, that's where someone goes, well, I mean, can we do it later? Like, and that's I don't have any great secrets for how to get over that, but I was really excited when I got everyone to like start talking about it and start wanting to do it. But then when it was it's not, do you think you'd buy this? This is $5. Will you buy it? That conversation when someone actually has to pay for it sort of is when it got tough.
When you were talking about people finding you, I happened to be, when I was at work, walking through the cafeteria, grabbing some breakfast, was walking out, and table with a couple people in it, they said, excuse me, do you mind if we ask you a few questions about this new logo we're going to try to do? I said, sure, but let me explain who I am first before not like, oh no, I'm important, but it was more like, I do accessibility for a living, so I'm going to bother you on a bunch of different fronts that you're not used to, Well, your color contrast is here, the font's too small, the background doesn't. I told them, don't do that. And of course, of all the logos that I told them that was the worst of them, that's the one they chose, and now they're stuck with it. But still, they weren't, I did get an email from them asking me a bunch more questions.
That makes sense. You put up your hand, right?
I happened to walk by and you asked me. I'm going to tell you.
One of the things I think we run into, right, is like you said, accessibility is important until something else is important, right? So when you said, did you say to your boss, I'm taking these 2 hours to do this, or did you just decide you were going to do that and ask for forgiveness later? How did that work for you?
A little bit of both, but there was definitely, I was able to get support for it. With my time, at least, wasn't too hard. It was a little more difficult when it was starting to expand outward a little bit more, because it was easier to say, okay, 1 person or 2 people, the little time here and there, and you can, we were able to demo, hey, look, we fixed some bugs or whatever. But it was when I was like, okay, well, for this not to be a me problem, this needs to be now we need to carve out some time for training, or we need to be able to willing to put this on our team's definition of done or whatever. That's kind of where it got a little tough. But then we had some I kind of said a few times where I managed to get some success out of it was, okay, you know what, let's try it this time. I know this is going to slow you down in some other way, but give me a shot to do it on this one, and we'll, if we were able to plan early enough so that actual differential didn't really add up to much in the end, I was able to show the result was quite a bit better than if we didn't get 100% of the stuff. We got enough of it to show that most of it was sort of marginal effort, if any different. And that helped a lot, I think, and then a few team members are then the knowledge starts to get spread a little bit. So now the next one, the baseline is just a little bit higher or a little bit higher. And so that helped, but it was definitely a struggle at times. we started to get pretty good within our sort of individual, like our product department. We had a sort of a cluster of related products, and then trying to bust out of that to the larger organization was sort of like, now the big fish in the small pond has gotten dropped into the ocean sort of thing. So it was sort of starting over in that regard, even though we'd had a lot of success.
Yeah, makes sense. It is definitely an uphill battle, but even if each of us goes back to our organization and we keep fighting those battles, well, we originally had 16, so 16 organizations that will be impacted, hopefully, that keep going up.
Yeah. And so I know folks got to or have been dropping off here, so I think we're gonna wrap up in a minute, but we will so appreciate all of the stories and insight that everybody shared, and we will make sure to share this out to folks after the fact. When we get the recording, we'll post it on the meetup group somehow, so just take a look there, and we will get that out.
Janna, this is a very good presentation. I appreciate it a lot. You did a good job with it. You were enthusiastic, you were well informed, and it went quickly with deliberate steps. I liked it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Do you ever post things to the Slack, the PDX Allies A11Y Slack channel?
We don't post a lot, but I do at least try to remember to always post when the events happen, and then occasionally we have a little bit of chatter sort of between events.
I guess I'm sorry, I meant the video of this and the slides.
It sort of varies. It's been it's usually when someone is kind enough to ask for it and remind us to do it. We typically do.
He's typing right now, Josh.
I'll remind you.
Yes.
I'm afraid I'll forget to, and I'm not sure that I even have a link to the meetup group, but I do check that Slack channel pretty often.
Oh, great. And Josh, what's the best way? Can I just send a PDF to you, or do I just put it on the meetup page? Oh, I can do it on the meetup page, can I?
I think so, yeah. And I'll look to see. I'm not sure. I'll share the video in some way that doesn't require, a Zoom account or anything like that. It'll just be a video. So we'll find a way to get it out there.
All right, it's getting late on the East Coast, so I'm going to head out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for all the good conversation.
You're
Bye.
welcome.
Have a good night.
Bye.